Do you ever wish your day wasn't dictated by your health? Are you tired of being tired all the time, or is pain holding you back from enjoying your time with your family? Would you like to manage your symptoms holistically, but you just don't know where to begin? I am so excited you're here. This podcast will help you understand how natural remedies work so you can relieve your symptoms and live a fuller life. My name is Penny. I'm an occupational therapist, a past pharmaceutical rep, a mom, and a wife with a strong faith. And for 25 years, I battled through debilitating Crohn's disease. I took all the medicine and did all the surgeries that stole so much of my time with my family, but never truly healed me. I finally realized if I was going to survive this disease, I needed to open my stubborn eyes to alternative solutions. I researched how perfectly our bodies work with plants and a lifestyle that made my health less of a burden to my family and aligned so beautifully with my faith and my medical training. If you are ready to reclaim your life with holistic options that are easy to implement as a busy mom and provide relief that lasts, this is the podcast for you. Hello, and welcome to episode number 16 of Becoming Natural podcast, breaking free from opiates with natural healing from Crohn's disease. This is a biggie. This is really the reason that I am where I am today. I am your host, Penny Sampler. Today, I am going to take on full storyteller mode as I talk through my podcast, and I'm taking notes on the spot, thinking of things that I need to cover in future episodes. I often realize in the middle of recording that there is a subject or something of importance that I haven't addressed yet, but I'm referring to it in the podcast. So after getting a little in the weeds in the last few episodes, I thought it best to share a little bit more about my story and how I got here and how it relates to many of the podcasts that I have already put out. Maybe not as warm and fuzzy as I would like it to be, but it is a part of my story that I have been gifted, and I feel like it could help many, many people if they're struggling with Crohn's and pain and other issues like that. So as I have mentioned before, and I completely own that I am stubborn and determined and have been all my life. I can hear my family laughing right now, but I believe that stubbornness gave me the drive that I needed to dig deep in some of the most painful times of my life to just keep swimming. Maybe that determination affects my relationships, but I think it's more of a character quality that I battle within myself. I guess you can ask my family about the unfavorable side of my stubbornness, but I truly feel that unrelenting drive is really more of an inner competitive battle that I have with myself versus with other people. I hope and I think that I am patient and kind to others and not competitive. I'm certainly not competitive with others unless it's in the right place, like on the tennis court maybe. But my inner voice is very strong. And for me, I could think I can always do something better or I can do something more challenging. I challenge myself a lot. I remember distinct conversations in my head since I was very young. I didn't give up easily learning how to do something new, and I still don't. I can run a little bit farther. I can work a little bit harder. I can study a little bit longer. The first surgery I had, I will never forget how incredibly painful it was when the orderlies took me to my room and I was mostly awake, and how incredibly painful it was when the orderlies moved me and picked me up with those sheets and ushered me from the gurney to my bed. It was absolutely excruciating. And I think that as an adult, mostly I relate to pushing through pain a little bit longer just by the nature of my life and my illness. So my entire abdomen at that time had just been opened and messed with. Every single cell, including my hairs and my body, hurt with that transfer. And then they plopped me onto my new bed for a few weeks. But after a few hours, I knew if I didn't get moving, I would never, ever move. So we got up and took our first walk. Maybe it was short to the nurse's desk and back, but vertical I was nonetheless. I never wanted to be praised. I just wanted to be well. I wanted to be normal. And the therapist in me knew that if I didn't get moving ASAP, I would not ever get moving. Pain is not necessarily where I was going with this episode, but I guess I need to somehow describe it in order to get to the part about the painkillers where I'm headed. Initially, when I was 16, pain was just burning in my stomach, kind of like an ulcer or reflux. I asked my parents for Maalox, nothing unmanageable at all. By the time I was in graduate school, I remember pain coming from certain foods that I ate, causing my stomach to be upset, and from some of the procedures that I had to have, because I was at a teaching hospital for graduate school, and I think they were absolutely giddy over a unicorn patient like me. I had yet to be diagnosed with Crohn's, and since my colon was healthy, they pulled out old school testing, like measuring the amount of acid secreted on my stomach. They did this by measuring the acid in my stomach when they simulated the production of food by using a nasogastric tube or an NG tube that they put up my nose while I was sitting on the edge of the bed. At least they tried. After about an hour of trying to shove that thing up my nose while I was wide awake, even the nurse gave up and called my doctor and to partially sedate me. My mom was there and I was crying. She was crying. Even the nurse had tears in her eyes. I remember telling her that while I had never had a baby before, I would much rather be giving birth than having an NG tube shoved up my nose while I was awake. I had such a strong gag reflex, it was not working. Nothing was going in there without knocking me out. So there was that kind of pain. As a young girl, single, living your best life, pain came in the form of eating all the wrong things for dinner and being up all night, vomiting and miserable. Again, I was just determined to be normal, and I wasn't thinking about taking care of my health. But the mind-bending pain arrived in my mid-30s. I had pain for a variety of reasons. Number one, I had pain because the bottom of my stomach was so ulcerated that the one doctor described it as basically 50 ulcers that had joined forces to make one enormous ulcer. This happened at the point where my initial surgery gave me a whole new hole for my food to exit my stomach, because my initial exit that you have, most normal people have, was swollen shut. So this man-made exit had no flap to cover it and prevent reflux, as most of us would understand the flap that you have between your esophagus and your stomach to prevent your stomach acids from going into your throat. Well, I had no flap. So I had reflux, but of my stomach acids refluxing from my intestines into my stomach. There were times that I just froze, breathless from the severity of the pain, and I could just shallowly breathe my way through it. My kids were ultimately always in tow when I recall some of the worst case scenarios. I was a stay-at-home mom, so they were with me all the time. Once I was at the grocery store, and I remember telling my boys in the grocery cart as I felt myself going down the tubes, I said, "Boys, I am going to be okay, but I am in so much pain right now. I need to just stand right here for a moment and I need to get through it. So I need you to just be patient and calm." And they sat there with their eyes wide open. And the kindest woman overheard me and offered help. I was so embarrassed. I just said, I have Crohn's and I have to get through this. I was leading crafts another time for 300 preschoolers at Vacation Bible School when the pain overcame me one time. And like before, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I just froze. I couldn't even talk at this point to my fellow moms to tell them I was going to be okay. I just froze. And was like, I'm not having a heart attack. Nothing is life-threatening, just unbearable pain. And then I would catch some relief for a bit before it would happen again. Another kind of pain that I had was when food was trying to get through the narrow parts of my intestine. With Crohn's, you can get strictures in some cases. It's basically inflammation that over time, if it remains untreated, it turns into a callus and causes a narrowing in your intestines. That callus is not as flexible as a normal intestine wall might be, so when large amounts of food or food that is harder to break down, like raw vegetables, for instance. I was told never to eat raw vegetables, but oh, how I loved my stir fry. But when that food is trying to push its way through a smaller opening, it's incredibly painful because that area is basically non-flexible. It's already sensitive, and then the pressure on that restriction really hurts. Even worse is when you think, oh, maybe if I take a sip of water, it'll help. Au contraire. Then you just have the weight of the water pressing harder on top of that food that can't get through. I learned to be aware of food that tended to increase in size also once you ate it, like rice or bread. They blow up inside of you once they get saturated with liquid. Oh, my Lanta. I very much learned that when I wanted to take one last bite, not to take it. I would double over in pain, kind of pain that doesn't go away quickly. I could tell you where my food was at any given time based on the stricture it was up against. Still very, very painful, but definitely not as sharp as the ulcer pain I described above. Yet another kind of pain with Crohn's would be gas or air. I said I would tell the ugly and the humiliating, but let me tell you, I had burps that could clear a room. It was problematic at best because my food was basically rotting in my stomach, literally, because it was not emptying. And that cluster of ulcers was a cluster of bleeding ulcers. The doctor describes them as oozing, almost like the clear fluid that comes out of a scab. The smell of death would come forth when I burped, and I know how bad it was, but to get gas in your belly like that, it was stretching out my stomach like it was a balloon. So where the ulcers were, and to relieve that balloon, I guess the pressure and the belch, oh my gosh, it was the best feeling you can imagine. It relieves so much pain. And I always had an image of a rancher like poking a cow's belly, relieving it of the bloat before they died. It was really bad. Another kind of pain, I developed a pain that became all too common when I finally pinpointed that my bones were hurting. This kind of pain was unrelenting and gave me many sleepless nights until I figured out it was severe anemia. If I realized that my bones were hurting, as I described it, it meant it was time for a blood transfusion. Of course, I delayed as long as possible because it was a whole ordeal for me to get blood, but as soon as I got a couple kinds of blood, I was back in business. But oh, the pain in my bones became a huge indicator it was time to go to the hospital. I'll just summarize the next section as hospital pain. This was the most difficult part. Pain from IVs as I'm a hard stick, pain from certain medications being infused, pain from getting a central line inserted bedside, pain from moving, breathing, scopes that became hours of removing food, but they would remove it through my throat. So they would pull it out of my throat and just tear up my throat as they removed it because the food wasn't going out my exit. Heart pain, just simply from fear. But I went to therapy over wound care pain and therapy over the night. I woke up from surgery with no pain meds on board at all. And I'm going to tell you just a little bit about that. And the fact that I'm not crying is really, really good. That means EMDR worked. I don't know which was worse. I will just say that wound care nurses have a gift, an incredible gift. They impart so much pain in scraping through your wound and cleaning it out to give you healing properly. But oh my word, their job is incredibly difficult because not only are they doing something really gross and really difficult, they have a screaming patient like me that they have to basically hold down and deal with. Because they didn't close my wound, which was open from my sternum to my pubic bone for many weeks, I had what's called a wound vac. And a wound vac is something they put a sponge inside your wound, and then they connect a vacuum tube to it, and it sucks the fluid out of your wound. And it's supposed to be really great. Actually, it does do a really great job. It keeps your wound dry, and it provides reverse pressure, and it allows your wound to heal from the bottom up instead of it prematurely healing from the top and leaving a gap down below, which is not what you want. So 2 to 3 times a week, those wound care girls came into my room to change out my packing for the vacuum and clean out my wound. And it doesn't help that when it's in your belly and that huge, I couldn't avoid looking right into the inside of my bowels. I mean, I had a front row view of the grossest part of my body. So in order to promote healing, the tissue has to be scraped to remove the dead tissue or necrotic tissue and inspire, I guess that's the word, but encourage the underlying tissue to start repairing again. It's like it slows down and it needs to be reminded, hey, get to work again. So after every surgery, while on the septic side of my recovery, and there were many, I was on a fentanyl drip and a button of fentanyl for about a day or so. Otherwise, my doctor was amazing with pain control. He used an epidural after surgeries and IV dripped high doses of alternating ibuprofen and Tylenol, which is a common practice in Europe, but not in the United States. In general, it worked. I was full of so much infection, however, I was in a constant state of breaking a fever from the Tylenol and ibuprofen, so my hair was constantly wet with sweat at all times. I ended up just rolling it in a turban. It was rough. It was not fun. It was gross. My hair was greasy. But when those sweet girls came in to clean my room, my wound, I am certain I broke the hearts of everybody in the room. It was brutal. I pre-medicated every single time with Dilaudid, but it really didn't do a darn thing but make me high. I couldn't be alone. I was scared, very scared, and probably darn near broke my dad's hand screaming through the cleaning every time. I was the patient you could hear screaming profanities down the hall, and I don't use profanity habitually, so wound care is nothing to ever take lightly. Always have empathy for anyone you know going through wound care and pray for their nurses. On top of that, most wound care typically ends up being diabetic foot ulcers, and these girls didn't commonly have someone like me who had wound care with an open gut, so for them, this was really, really exciting to have something outside of a diabetic foot ulcer. So I typically had 4 or 5 nurses in the room at a time. One of the worst nights of my life was the night that we had a late emergent surgery at probably 10 p.m. I woke up in my room and needed to adjust my body in bed to get comfortable, and I couldn't even pull with my hands on the bed rails. I still didn't know my outcome at this point. I could hear my husband sleeping soundly in the bed across the room. We were gratefully in the fabulous suite by now that my awesome doctor provided, and I'm so grateful for that for my family. I didn't have enough mobility in my chest to take a breath. I couldn't even say his name, and I desperately needed to move and adjust because I had no pain medicine. None. I was certain that I was a story that I had heard multiple times before. They opened me up. There was too much damage, so they closed me up to die. That was the only alternative I could come up with. I tried to moan, I tried to wiggle, and I finally woke him up by pushing something off the table that made a loud sound. When he finally came to me, I asked him, what did they do to me? Was I going to die? And he told me how well I did in surgery and what was I talking about? I told him to get a nurse, that I needed pain medicine stat. They adjusted me gratefully, and the progression of the next 4 to 5 hours was unbearable. When they finally received orders from my doctor in the middle of the night to give me a pain pump, it took forever for the pharmacy to send the meds. Then I looked over, and the nurses were literally reading the directions to the pain pump. They had the pages like wide open, start trying to figure out how to use this pain pump. And it turns out that for the first day, the hospital had ordered a new pain pump, and they were using it on me for the first time, and they couldn't figure it out, and they started to walk out of the room, and I said, wait, help, where are you going? So convenient for me, having those new pain pumps, they didn't know why it wasn't working, so they paid someone from OB who's used to using the pain pumps, who pointed out the pharmacy sent up the wrong canister for the new pain pump. I thought I was going to die, quite literally, of pain. What seemed like forever again, the proper pain canister was sent and the pump was initiated, but it doesn't work immediately. I was pushing that button every 15 minutes that I could. From waking up at 1 a.m., it was all finally resolved, although still in large amounts of pain by shift change, which was 7 a.m. Laying in that bed, so helpless, and losing my sanity over the pain for 6 hours while they figured out the pain pump nearly did me in. It was absolutely brutal, but I am okay now. The fifth kind of pain, you can breathe. That's basically the worst case scenarios, but the other pain would be walking around while carrying 5 drains across my belly. They look harmless, but they're poking through your muscle belly, and my muscles would spasm around the insertion of that drain when I would sit up on the edge of the bed or stand up and walk, or they got tugged in the wrong direction and I had a wincing pain. To this day, I still get an occasional spasm where one of those drains inserted into my abdomen. So having those removed bedside as well, a whole nother story. Quick, but painful. And finally, the recovery kind of pain. By the grace of God, having my stomach removed, getting septic, and going through a horrific battle against infection in my body that I'm healed moment never really occurred. But one day I realized I really was healed. Now the pain presented as scar tissue from all the surgeries that I had. My incision would start to heal from the bottom up, and they would go in for surgery again. This happened 6 times in 10 weeks, then 3 more times in the year following my release from the hospital. Lots and lots of opening me back up means lots and lots of scar tissue. And with such a large area of scar tissue from my rib cage to my pubic bone, adhesions were inevitable. Even as a therapist, I worked on tummy time at home to reduce adhesions, laying on my tummy on a pillow, progressing to laying on my tummy on my soft bed, to trying to sit up on my elbows. Oh, the tug of scar tissue. It hurt, and it was really awkward and uncomfortable. But adhesions mean that the scar tissue has healed and it's connected the skin to the muscle. So there's no movement between that surface area of skin and your muscle. So I had places that looked stuck in each surgery. He would go and try to go underneath the skin and release the scar tissue. But in reality, it just really scarred right back. By the time I had recovered from the stomach removal and the sepsis, it was probably a year, but I was still ginger. I was still weak. I was still learning how to get my stamina back. But now I was dealing with pain that came from the ripping of the scar tissue as I forced it to stretch. As I felt better and I moved beyond tummy time, I picked up my tennis racket again. I tried to return to normal again. I tried to get on the floor with my kids. Every scar tissue pop I felt was a really good thing because that meant it was releasing, but it was really painful. I found a great sports medicine massage that worked on myofascial release because my lower back was killing me because I couldn't stand up straight because the pull of all the scar tissue in the front of my abdomen was pulling me forward. So having that myofascial release on your belly is somewhat awkward, makes you a little ticklish, but oh my gosh, it helped me so much. I can't even describe, I was able to stand up straight for the first time in a year. So my pain no longer revolved around my Crohn's symptoms, but scar-related pain. Multiple times over the years, not only was I on loads of opiates in the hospital and very glad to have them, but I was told by several doctors I would be on opiates for the rest of my life, like orally taking pills. No one wants to hear that. And this was before we heard the terms opioid crisis or opiate abuse. My surgeon had been weaning me down from pain meds after my surgery to the point I was only on one, quote, minor opiate, as they called it. I wasn't allowed to take ibuprofen because I had an ulcerating stomach disease. Ironically, I had most of my stomach removed, so I'm not sure what would be ulcerating, but still no ibuprofen, supposedly. So doctors thought opiates were best for me over ibuprofen. I still grappled with that because by then the world knew about opiates and the harm that came with them in the medical field, and I definitely knew better than to agree to be on them for life, but worse, I knew I was dependent. For 2 to 3 years, I was taking this mild opiate, but I would rotate one day from ibuprofen to opiates the next day. But you get tolerant to opiates. So my opiates increased to approximately 6 to 8, sometimes 10 a day. And then next day, I would take 8 to 10 ibuprofen. I was not in a good way, and I knew it. The opiate made me feel good. I could get things done and I could function, but I didn't truly take away my pain. It just made me not really care about my pain. I would get to the bottom of the bottle and I would be counting how many I had until a refill. And that's when I knew I really had a problem. I didn't want to be on them, but without them, I couldn't function with the pain. I even called the local pain clinic at a big hospital here in Kansas City, and I asked if I could be a patient. The lady on the phone was completely befuddled by my call. She told me, their job was to manage your pain meds, not to help you get off of them. That absolutely blew my mind. So no one gets off your pain meds at a pain clinic? No, ma'am. But they don't. I was on my own completely. Each time I tried to stop the opiates, I started to feel fluish. I knew I just needed to push through it, but withdrawals would take 2, maybe 3 days of feeling bad, and it was easier with 3 kids to just take the pill than to take a break in life. That's very embarrassing to admit. I was so ready and looking for alternatives when I was introduced to CBD oil. I was ripe. God's timing was impeccable. I had heard of CBD, but it was not an avenue I had investigated or was I even interested in. You're talking to a girl here who has never smoked. I barely drink for the sake that if it doesn't hurt my stomach, since my stomach surgeries, if I drink any alcohol, my face turns bright red. So I just feel so much better if I just stick to my Coke when I'm out with my friends. And I was assured that this CBD was legal and safe, so I ordered it. I needed something. So while I was waiting for my order to arrive, I did a major rabbit hole into CBD, a good quality CBD, what makes it good, what makes it bad, how it works, only to discover that CBD is the essential oil of the hemp plant. And I had already become a believer in essential oils, so this became much easier for me to wrap my head around. The product I took did not make you feel high. It was completely organic. It was legal. It was safe. All the check marks by the Farm Bill that was passed in 2018. Completely legal. And it was not going to make me feel anything except for better. I really needed this to work. I started the CBD drops under my tongue at the same time that I started the pain cream on my belly. After a few days, I was forgetting the pain cream because I didn't need it. And by about 7 days, I had weaned completely off the mild opiate to simply CBD oil. I had 0 withdrawal symptoms and I had 0 pain. I was in total disbelief. I continued to use it for a week or so to make sure it wasn't a fluke, and it wasn't. By this time, so many people in our lives were in tune with my health dilemma and had prayed for me for 25 or more years and knew what I had been through. So for me to say that I am off all my pain medicine and feel amazing drew a lot of attention. I had to tell people about how I saved my life, and I am fully convinced of that. Had I continued the increase in my opiates, I don't know where I would be. But I saved my life by getting off the opiates and was taking something completely natural, made by God. Friends and family wanted to try it for achy joints, anxious feelings, sleep, and I was sending them all to the person who introduced me when she said, "Stop this. You should be selling this." And for the record, I was like, no, I'm not a salesperson. I don't do that. But I do love the education piece. I obviously love the rabbit holes. I love the research, but the sales, womp. But I did what she told me, and I have been top sales in the company every year since it began in 2019. I do not say that to brag. I say that to tell you that it works. There is an art to CBD. You have to have the proper dosing and a decent product in a world of terrible terrible options for CBD. They were completely unregulated, coming from China, coming from all over the place, full of heavy metals, full of pesticides. So you have to know that you have a reputable product. But I would challenge anyone who says CBD doesn't work for me. It works for everyone. You just have to find your proper dosing, and you have to find a quality product. If you're having any sort of a reaction that's negative, like a Herxheimer effect, you have to get through that as well. Very few people I have worked with actually get the herxing, but that is basically meaning that you need to detox because you're healing something super fast, causing a lot of negative side effects. Herxing would be the appropriate scientific term that I didn't know that I would use when I described my exorcism when I was on the yeast diet for the first time. I was having so much die-off of the yeast and parasites and who knows what. Their dead microbes were basically injecting poisons, toxins into my body and running around my system, causing all sorts of issues. But once I stubbornly stuck to it for, I think it took about 5 days, I woke up to an incredibly wonderful, new, healthy life. It was remarkable. So ultimately, I don't think I ever explained exactly why I love CBD so much, and I wanted to impart that here, to what extent and how my pain presented, and why I needed so much pain medication. And now I am off every opiate and haven't had one since April of 2019 when I started taking CBD daily. That, my friends, is an accomplishment. It's like getting a sober chip. But I will say, if you've never experienced the overuse of opiates yourself, opiate dependency or addiction are not the people that you think they are. They are the girl next door, like me, or the high school kid who had an ACL repair, or the grandmother who had back surgery. When you don't understand pain, and my opiate opinion is stated here, opiates make you want more pain meds while not really even treating the pain. In order to get off opiates, you might have to withdraw for a couple days. You might have to counteract the thought in your head that you're in pain, because sometimes I think you're really not in pain. It's the opiates making you think that you're in pain. Does that make sense? So you might have to withdraw for a few days, and the withdrawal makes you think you need the medicine. It's a crazy mind game. So dependency, in my humble opinion, is needing it because you're in pain without it. Getting off and staying off it is not an issue, as it's not for me. But addiction is seeking out those opiates and taking them regardless of pain and wanting the high. The scary part about opiates is that the longer you take them, the more that you need. The more you need, the more the receptors in your brain are full of opiates. I hope that I have said this before, but I will say it again. CBD is the safest form of pain medicine on earth. There are 0 deaths related to CBD. This is true simply because the portion of the brain responsible for your heart beating and your lungs breathing does not have a single receptor for the receptor system that CBD binds to. You will never, ever OD on CBD. You may get diarrhea or a headache from taking too much, or you may be wide awake when you want to be asleep or asleep when you want to be awake, but you will never overdose on CBD. However, do you know what palliative care is? Palliative care is when you are put on morphine, an opiate, and they steadily increase the dose of morphine until you die peacefully. You die because that same part of the brain that doesn't have receptors for CBD does have receptors for opiates. So whether on the streets, at home, or on palliative care, if you take too many opiates, your heart will stop beating and your lungs will stop breathing. And that is why we are in an opiate crisis. You have to want to get off of them. You have to want to save your life. And I am the first to admit that under doctor's supervision in the hospital, I needed them. All of them, as you can hear from my pain situations. I have taken every opiate known to man, and praise God, I did not become addicted. I am not saying it's the best and only form of pain meds, as my epidural and Tylenol ibuprofen routine sure made it nice to not be loopy for a month on end. So there it is, the not so shiny part of my story, but a part I have made serious strides in working through in EMDR to come to terms with the pain that I endured and the trauma it caused for me. We are created to heal. even our brains. I hope this helps someone out there. I hope this reaches someone who needs to hear it. And if you know someone who is struggling with opiates, please feel free to share. This is a very important part of my story and something that I really take seriously. So I hope you have a great day, and something about my opiate use can help you or someone you know. I will link up actually a few books that I really enjoyed learning more about opiate use in my show notes. So have a great day and adios.
One of the most significant additions to my daily routine was a clean, safe, USDA organic, high-quality CBD oil. Please know, not all CBD is the same. This family-owned company in North Carolina changed my life, allowing me to get off opiates and live life without pain from surgeries, creaky joints after workouts, or gardening. It's a mind-blowing natural step to decrease discomfort, improve mood, help with sleep, prevent or slow future age-related annoyances, and many other benefits. You can check out my website at pennysampler.com, which includes $10 off your first order. To be clear, having Crohn's, I've never smoked, I don't drink alcohol, or ever been high. This is a reputable option that I'm incredibly passionate about sharing. If you would like personal assistance with selecting the products, please fill out the simple health assessment quiz in the show notes, and I will be in touch with you as soon as possible. If you enjoyed today's episode, would you take 30 seconds to leave a review and share it with a friend? It helps me help someone else, and reviews are the best way to do that. Thank you so much for your support, and I'll meet you back here for another episode next week.